Hi, everyone. I'm Kristan Hawkins, and thanks for joining me for a new episode of Explicitly Pro-Life podcast. Today, we have a special guest on, Nicole Neily. She is the president and founder of Parents Defending Education, a nonpartisan, nonprofit national organization that gives parents and the resources and the support they need to advocate for their children's education. She also, prior to founding PDE, she was also created Speech First, a nationwide membership organization that defends college students' free speech rights through litigation, other means. Since their debut in February 2018, Speech First has filed federal lawsuits against the University of Michigan, University of Texas, University of Illinois, Iowa State, Central Florida, Virginia Tech for violating its students' members' speech rights, securing major victories at the appellate level, enforcing policy changes, not only at the schools in question, but in dozens of other schools across the country. She has a lot of experience serving in this role, and I'm so excited to talk with her today because we have a lot to talk about, Nicole, and what you're doing with Parents Defending Education, as well as defending students' free speech rights. But the reason I asked you on, Nicole, is I want to hear what you're doing with this new organization, because as you know, we are experiencing a major movement in American culture right now where parents are really, I think for the first time in a while, paying attention as to what their child's getting taught in school.
Yeah, this all kind of got started, during COVID, like all things did. And I think it's kind of ugly, obviously, to say that there's a silver lining to COVID, but I think it was a real opportunity for people to suddenly see what their children were learning on a regular basis, because classrooms were in people's living rooms. Right. And what they saw horrified them, and how they were treated by their schools and their school administrations and their teachers horrified them. I mean, they were dismissed, they were mocked, they were derided. And so I think it really sent a message to families that and we heard this echoed, obviously, in the Virginia election. These are our decisions. These are not your decisions. And I think that made a lot of people angry. And so what I wanted to do, for me, like the reason I kicked it off, or I got this organization going, there was a district near where I grew up outside of Chicago, where a superintendent told the Wall Street Journal he was going to allow Black and brown children back for in-person education before white children in the name of anti-racism. I thought, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. I was so angry. And I went to some friends. I said, I want to sue these guys. He said, yeah, great. But, the problem is like most people don't know this is unconstitutional. I think you have to start somewhere else. And so I thought, all right, well, let's, kind of see what's out there. I assume that there were lots of resources for parents to know what their rights are, because if you know what your rights are, then you know when the lines are crossed. And it turns out there's actually not a lot out there. Most I'm married to a constitutional lawyer, so we have very boring dinner parties. But most people
and you're a lawyer as well, right?
I'm not. I just play one on TV.
Okay. Well, you're very closely aligned with all lawyer things, so.
Okay. Yes, all lawyer things. I translate lawyer into English. But most people don't think about the 14th Amendment in the context of their second grader. And I thought, okay, well, let's tell people what this means in totally normal terms. I mean, people are, parents are so used to being talked down to and having jargon thrown at them. Let's give them the information they need so that they can be better, advocates for their children. And then once people know what their rights are, let's tell them to do something. It's not enough to just vent on Facebook and Twitter. You have to go out and do something about it. And doing something, means something different to everybody. Obviously, there's cancel culture. People are really scared about retaliation, not only against them, but against their children. And so, doing something can be anything from passing on an anonymous tip to us, and then we will go on TV and we will take the slings and arrows, through running for school board, writing a letter to the editor. But everybody can do something. And if we all do one little thing, we can really make a big difference. And so it's been really, I wish we didn't have to be in this fight, but it's been a really incredible year just getting this movement going.
And what really caught my attention was, I think parents started, and this was across the board. It wasn't like a pro-life thing. Parents were concerned about how their kids were being taught math. Critical race theory has obviously been a big talking point. The teachers are talking about race and ethnicity in the classrooms. But this is something in the pro-life movement that we've been talking about for a very long time, is about, Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion vendor. Those very people that profit off of the sale of abortions are the ones in many school districts who are entrusted to go give the sex ed talks, which is supposed to prevent unwanted pregnancies and abortion. So it's like the tobacco lobby gets money to go into a school and tell kids not to smoke. Like, it doesn't make any sense, yet somehow we trust them with it. And, we get calls from time to time from parents, and thankfully we've been able to see when parents get, riled up, they get interested, they can stop a Planned Parenthood from going into their school district. We saw it in Reading, Pennsylvania, Tacoma, Washington, we were involved. It's easier, we have found, to stop the Planned Parenthoods from going into schools than to work retroactively to get them removed. But this is why I really wanted you to come on, because we have a lot of parents who tune in, and a lot of just younger pro-life advocates who are soon going to be parents. How do you equip parents? Like, what can you do when a radical left movement is coming into your child's school district, like Planned Parenthood, or teaching some crazy CRT theory that's telling, if you're white, that your white children are, you're evil. What are the actual steps a parent can take? Because that's what I really want to know, is like, what are the action items that, my gosh, I'm so thankful my kids are homeschooled, because I'd be like the worst nightmare for any public school my kids were in. But what would I do?
It's that's saying sunshine is the best disinfectant. And that's why we're seeing all these districts now that are fighting tooth and nail to keep families out of the classroom. I still can't go into my kid's school because of COVID. We're not allowed to even enter the building. People are asking,
but you pay for the building. You're the taxpayer.
Right? Yeah. People are asking, I'd like to see curriculum, and districts are telling them, you have to file a public records request, right? They're trying to hide everything from us because they're ashamed of they know that it's wrong. And so I think it's that, that saying, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. When I talk to my kids and I say, how was school? They say we had pizza. They're not telling me about the lessons. And so I think everybody has to just be so vigilant and ask. And if you don't get the answers you want from your teacher, go to the principal, go to the superintendent, go to the school board, file the public records request. We will file public records requests for people and expose what's going on. We have a big map on our website. We call it our indoctrination map, because I wanted to show people this is not just, and I think even among our friends and in our world, a lot of people assume this is mostly a California and a New York problem, that it's not in red states, it's not in private schools or parochial schools. It is absolutely everywhere. And so just because you send your kid to a Catholic school, a Jewish school, your child is not safe. Your child is not immune from this. And so first is just knowing what is going on and telling people in your community. And that's, I think, really the most important part. And then find a tribe. Find other people. And there are other people. If you are uncomfortable, there is certainly another person in your class, in your school, who is also similarly unhappy. And so we try to quietly, introduce people to each other, because there is strength in numbers. You are not alone in fighting this. And so we really want to remind people that we have done tons of polling about this. There's all these numbers out there. People do not like what is being shoved down their kids' throats. And what is so fascinating to me is the kinds of people who come to us, they're not all Republicans. They're not all conservatives. We talk to a ton of first-generation Americans who are appalled by what is going on. The war on merit, the gender ideology that's being pushed down families' throats. We are seeing schools that are transitioning kids behind parents' backs and hiding it from families. It is horrifying what is taking place in our schools. We just recently translated all of our resources into Chinese and Spanish, because we have so many people coming to us who are, this is their first rodeo, their first time activists, but they want to protect their children and they want to fight back. And so even though it seems dark, it is, there is so much hope, because the cavalry is coming.
They're scared of us. The Biden administration's DOJ is they've been asked to investigate parents. It's been crazy that the Department of Justice is now on behalf of these whacked out liberal school boards investigating parents for showing up at school board meetings and making their lives miserable. I find it hilarious that and then the DOJ is probably entertaining it, because what else is the Biden administration going to do? Honestly, I'd rather them be focused on trying to make some parents' lives miserable than promoting more chemical abortions, like their recent ruling, getting rid of all the REMS, common sense of safety regulations on these chemical abortion pills. But it's unbelievable. that these schools, tell parents you have to file a records request in order to see the curriculum of your child. Is it important? Is there like state websites? So if your child's 13, you're like, I don't know, are they teaching sex ed yet? Are they waiting? Can you go to a state website to see what the curriculum has to entail? I remember when my husband was a public school teacher. I forget what they call them. Like there are SOLs, or I think they're called SOLs. And so it's like little bullet points that he had to make sure he was covering in every sort of subtopic of history. Is there a way that his parents can just see those at least? Because that would give you a pretty good indication, like, oh, they're getting ready to have the sex talk.
Yeah, so yes and no. Because education it's not a federal issue. It is a local and a state issue. And so there are 50 state boards of education that have kind of a patchwork, and some are better than others about being transparent and some are not. But what we're finding is a lot of this stuff is sneaking in through jargon. We have just through our tip line heard of social emotional learning as kind of the new buzzword, because I think schools have figured out you say critical race theory and everybody realizes, whoa, there's a problem. And so
social and emotional learning.
Yeah. So let's, and it comes under the guise of, let's be kind to each other. But that's where we're seeing a lot of the LGBTQ things come in, a lot of, and when I looked up opt-out forms for my kid's school, and it was talking about bullying. And it turns out that, no, it's under bullying. We have to be kind to everybody, and we have to not judge people's choices, and no matter, who they have sex. And so it's like, it all kind of, I think you have to dig a lot deeper, even if there are those bullet points on state websites as well. And it's funny because a lot of teachers are very uncomfortable with what they are being forced to do as well. We have probably 10 or 15% of our tips come from teachers or from people who work in state education bureaucracies who are deeply, deeply troubled by, think about with schools being shut down for the past year, learning loss is abysmal. Children are really, it's a question if they'll ever catch up. Schools have finite time, they have finite money, and instead of focusing on making up that loss, they're focused on pushing radical racial theories, gender theories. My kids are only in school for 7 hours a day.
How
racist.
Do you do that? But math is racist.
Yes, science is racist. It's crazy the kinds of.
It's interesting because I know you're in Northern Virginia. I was reading a story. It was in one of the big papers about how, it was the Asian American students who were actually being disproportionately targeted because there's these higher level math, like high schools, and you have to test into them or whatever. And so now they're saying like only so many percentage of like white kids or Asian kids can go to these schools. So like you're like now going to be limited because they can only take, it's
the wrong kind of minority. We actually have a lawsuit against the city of New York. We're in a lawsuit right now in New York because some activists said that the specialized high school program, it's the wrong race that is in it because it's mostly Asian. And
which is interesting. So Asian Americans who literally were thrown into internment camps, which I saw in your bio, your parents met at a internment camp, which
my grandparents, they
grandparents,
met at
okay.
Camp. But I'm not now I'm white adjacent.
Yeah, you're not minority enough, so you're with us. You're just this white person who's part of the evil problem. No, it's unbelievable because it's like Asian Americans who were thrown into internment camps, but now they're too wealthy and doing too well. So now they just get lumped in with the white people. Like it is, I don't know. I'm looking at something. One of my friends and one of our Students for Life ambassadors, Kristan Hawkins, she got really involved in, she's very big on Instagram. She understands Instagram. I don't. But she got really involved during COVID and everything in the Denver city schools. And she posted this flyer, and I actually have it on my desktop, Courageous Conversations About Race Overview. And like, it is unbelievable. This flyer that was like hanging in a middle school, a public middle school. Like one of the conditions is examine the presence and role of whiteness. Use a working definition for race. Like, isolate race. Like, it is like discriminatory things that they're telling these students. So it's unbelievable. And I'm so glad. What else can parents, I'm like just so thankful that you're doing this. What else can parents do? So pay attention to the curriculum, look into the school, I guess the state's Board of Education. I assume pay attention to what the school board is doing. What can you help parents do if they contact Parents Defending Education?
Sure. So we have this tip line. We receive between 50 to 200 tips a week, kind of depending on the news cycle. And almost everybody wants to be anonymous. And so we vet everything. We fact check everything. We ask people to send us screenshots or PDFs or a link to something. And then, Bob in Omaha doesn't know how to get something to Fox News. We do. And so we can help shine a spotlight on what's going on in their district. I think elected officials are horrified when they find out what's going on in their state. Parents are horrified when they find out what's going on in their backyard. I mean, most people, we're all just, trying to make it through the day. We have kids. We're trying to make it to bedtime. And so I think it's just really hard for people to stay on top of this. But it's, what's that Hillary Clinton saying? It takes a village. I get a little bit from my second grade class and my first grade class, and somebody else gets something different from their third grade class. And together you can form a really comprehensive picture about what's going on in a school. And so that's been really fun. When we get the tips, we push them out, we publicize them. We file complaints with the Office of Civil Rights. I'm going to file 2 this week because there's just this new rise in segregated groups, segregated spaces, safe spaces, affinity spaces. I mean, the kind of thing that, I thought was.
What was the second word? I know safe space. What's affinity?
Affinity. So, so it's like a little club, right? And it's, we're not supposed to identify.
I always mean in kindergarten when they had the rectangle and the square and the circle and the triangle reading group, because we all kind of figured out, I was in the rectangle group and that was the best readers, but my best friend was in the square group, and so she was in them. I thought that was kind of mean, but then I realized it probably makes more sense for the teacher. But now we have the affinity group. Okay, keep going. I'm just thinking of the rectangle group.
So we filed the complaints. We have done a bunch of petition campaigns, helping people send comments to the Department of Education as they try and float different programs to, again, inject race, inject the 1619 Project or Ibram Kendi into our schools. And we have been filing lawsuits. We have a lawsuit right now against Wellesley Public Schools outside of Boston. We have this one that we're working on in New York.
Please tell me what's going on at Wellesley Public Schools, because I just had my largest protest ever at Wellesley College this fall. So if that protest was anything reflective of their community, this must be interesting.
Yeah, so Wellesley had these segregated affinity groups. They said they had one for Asians, they had ones for Black and brown students. They said white students were not allowed, a white teacher was not allowed. I mean, this is taking place in 2021 in America. I mean, I thought that we ended this with Brown versus Board of Education, but no.
Does the Civil Rights Act stop any of this?
Because
I'm pretty sure that, the Civil Rights Act is to stop, segregation at the harm of African Americans, but I think it would cover white people too, right? Or Asian Americans?
Yeah, discrimination on the basis of race or skin color, period. It doesn't matter what, you could be purple. You can't treat purple people differently either. So it's, but it's so sad that we have to do this and go in and hold these people accountable for their decisions. I mean, it's appalling.
Oh gosh. All right. Let's switch gears. So your Parents Defending Education. I mean, I laugh, but it makes me just so angry. But the other thing I want to talk to you about in talking about bad schools is free speech rights. So it's speech first. I mean, we've seen, since immediately after President Trump was elected, we saw immediate uptick in discrimination, violent threats on college campuses. This fall, we saw a lot more threatening behavior. People, I think we're going to actually see it worse in the spring as the abortion lobby realizes we're closer than ever to becoming a post-Roe generation here. Doesn't mean our work's done, by the way. It's going to actually get worse and harder. But it's been interesting that and now with COVID, a lot of our groups that we work with lawsuits are busy filing lawsuits against companies, discriminating against employees who aren't vaxxed or whatever. So we've actually had to hire our own general counsel. We're, for the first time ever, Students for Life is filing our own lawsuits, not with other legal groups because they're too busy filing other free speech suits. So now we have our own legal team filing our own lawsuits, and we're just selectively choosing which ones to file because we have a plethora of lawsuits, and they're all against high schools. The college campuses, from most part, have kind of, in my opinion, and you might disagree with me, have kind of gotten that you can't really discriminate against pro-life students. We have so much case law, we partnered with Lines Defending Freedom and Thomas More Society over the years, but it's the high schools. Like, these principals think that, like, they, like, stupidly in writing will acknowledge that they're just not going to approve a pro-life student group because it could trigger somebody, or being pro-life is religious and I am the head of this fiefdom here and I declare it no. Like, what are you seeing when it comes to free speech protection in public schools, like high schools and middle schools, as well as colleges?
Yeah, so it's interesting. There's a case from the 60s, actually, Tinker v. Des Moines. And in that decision, right, the justice, the Supreme Court said, students do not check their rights at the schoolhouse gate. So students have these rights, even if they're saying something that their classmates don't like, they still have to be allowed to do it. What we're starting to see is, I think, principals, superintendents that are like, well, we're trying to ban disruption. And I think that was, that's kind of, I think there's still kind of a needle to thread on this. There was the case before the Supreme Court in March of the swearing cheerleader in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And so it's, schools will start to claim, well, like, your speech is disruptive. And I think that's where you have to say, no, like, this is a perfectly acceptable, widely held political view. It's not disruptive, right? And if your students are not able to handle somebody else's viewpoint with whom they disagree, then you are not teaching them to think properly, period. That is right. I mean, I remember having to, do debate in high school, and we had to take and defend a position that we disagreed with, because it helps, puts your in somebody else's shoes, but you have to, come up with the strongest argument. And I think our students are largely just missing out on that experience altogether, right? They're being totally coddled. They're in this silly little bubble. And they are being explicitly told what to think, not how to think. And who are their teachers and who are their principals and where are they coming from? They're coming from these crazy statist, education programs where the teachers all learn critical race theory and they all learn critical queer theory and all this stuff. And to them, you and I are like super, super evil. And like, they think it is right.
Like a physical threat. Like at Wellesley, Nicole, they labeled my presence on campus a physical threat. I was physically threatening to trans students because I said only women can get pregnant.
Oh, how dare you?
I know.
Oh my.
But I mean, it's like, that was a call to cancel me. And,
right.
And we had hundreds of people, professors and students, come out to protest and call to cancel me because I was a physical threat. Me.
It's wild.
I'm like I'm not even 5'4".
But years ago, we used to hear this chant on college campuses that speech is violence, right? That was the justification for why we could disrupt events or speakers, because your speech it makes me stressed out. You say something that I don't agree with and it raises my blood pressure, and everybody knows chronic stress is a killer, right? And so speech is violence, right? And that was the justification for why, like, I could punch somebody in the face. Last summer, during all the protests, that morphed into silence is violence. And so I can't even keep my mouth shut if I disagree with somebody. I have to parrot.
That's right, because you're not an anti-racist.
Right.
You have to speak out and march in order to be an anti-racist. Because if you're not anti-racist, you're a racist.
Yes.
I'm getting my new term
right. And so it's just this, like, language jujitsu. It's like mind-blowing.
I feel so old. I can't keep up with all. You're right. They said speech is violence, and then this last summer, not speaking is also violence.
Yeah.
So now what I do, I'm committing an act of violence.
Yeah, but programs that we have sued about through Speech First, bias response teams, where universities encourage students to rat on each other, we're now seeing those morph or end up in the K-12 systems as well. That was another program that Wellesley Public Schools had. These are, for your listeners who are not familiar with this, they're online reporting portals where students or faculty are encouraged to report on the speech of their peers. So I hear somebody saying something in class that I think is hurtful, hateful, harassing, biased, and I can report on you, anonymously. I don't have to put my name.
I would be expelled from high school if this was happening.
It's in Wellesley, the parents are calling it the snitch line. I mean, this is the Stasi in East Germany asking people to report on their neighbors. So, students, out of an abundance of caution, just don't talk about anything remotely controversial. And so our children are missing out on an educational opportunity to even hear a different point of view because they're so scared of their peers. Nobody wants to be dragged through like a bureaucratic star chamber. And so
and you
it's a
said
real problem.
That these schools still have these bias response teams, and now it's growing and going down into the lower levels.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And even, I mean, during COVID, we saw all these universities then, they said they added COVID to their bias response things. Like, we already have this reporting line. We might as well add,
if someone's not wearing their mask.
Not wearing her mask. I can tell on her on that too. And so.
It's funny and yet so scary. I don't know how. I mean, that was when I was at Wellesley, I was having these conversations with students. And actually, even I was at my last speaking school tour was at University of San Diego, a Catholic school. And it was the loudest silent protest of me I've ever had. And all these students surrounded the building and screamed the whole time. And I went out beforehand. And you had to have a ticket, apparently, to get in. So I grabbed a bunch of tickets and I said, would you like to come hear my talk? I'll talk, and then you can ask me as many questions as you want. You can ask me anything you want. Why don't you come hear my talk if you care so much about this issue? Absolutely not. I'll never listen to your trash. And it was so interesting because I was thinking like, man, when I was in college and there was like a controversial, we never had anyone talk about abortion, but if we had anybody who was controversial on campus, you can bet your ass I was there. Because like I wanted to like ask him a question. I got my other conservative friends to get there. Like that was the point, like of going to hear somebody say something, listen to their points, because listening to the other side's arguments actually help you be a better communicator and debater of the facts. And then you try to make them look like an idiot in the Q&A. That was just part of the fun. Like, where is the fun?
There is no fun. It's just a bunch of, joyless Victorian scolds right now.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for coming on. I'm so excited to hear what you're doing, not only on the campus, the speech first, the free speech aspect of your, career and your mission, but also parents defending education, because, somebody's got to do this work. And when it comes to the pro-life movement and what we care about here, and everyone tuning into Explicitly Pro-Life, we've got to find a way to better engage. And you have to think about, in a post-Roe world, friends, we're going to have to make sure we're offering better alternatives than Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry when it comes to sex education. And we really have got to get out, SRA, sexual risk avoidance education out there. And there's some wonderful state-approved curriculums that don't hide the facts, but give straight up facts to students, information that they actually need to know before they make decisions. And we're going to have to really, I think, reinvest. I was having this conversation with one of our Students for Life fellows the other day of, we've got to do more as a pro-life movement than we've done before. When you see fewer abortions and we see states that finally move to ban abortions, well, that's only when our work is beginning. And we talk a lot about the Pregnancy Center Network and making sure women know about the Pregnancy Center Network. But another flip side of that is we have to make sure we're in our schools talking about sexual risk avoidance. And the first step for all of us is going to have to be figuring out what are our kids being taught right now in school, who's doing that teaching. So I hope you all will get connected with Nicole's organization, Parents Defending Education. Nicole, what's your all's website?
It is defendinged.org.
Awesome. Defendinged.org. I cannot wait to go check out that map. A friend of mine in California, the Capital Resource Institute, told me they're putting together a map of just the sex ed curriculums in every school district in California. And I don't think it's done. Actually, I should probably check it out. This is why I have a computer in front of me. I looked for it the other week because she told me this was happening in like September, and I've been like, oh my gosh, I can't wait. Yeah, it's not up there yet. They do a similar thing to what you are doing, where you can report in California to the Capital Resource Institute what's going on. But I cannot wait for this map to come out, because I think it's going to be very, very scary. And very alarming for a lot of parents to find out how their students are being taught and what they're being taught. So thank you for what you're doing. It's so important. I hope everybody checks out Parents Defending Education and Nicole's work and her mission, and hopefully we'll hear from you soon. Thanks, Nicole. And thanks all for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to Explicitly Pro-Life and share this episode with friends, especially friends who have young children, K through 12, and even in college. Bye, guys.